Hello, I'm Chris Athanas. I'm a KMP developer. Tech support's coming out Tuesday for that thing. Close it up finally. Hey, I want to do some more about heroic developer, and some specific quotes I wanted to pull out for with Ken Thompson, because I was just kind of going through his stuff, and there was like, I really want to make it clear, like the mindset he has is what it takes, and there's some key things that he did, which are awesome. But the attitude, this is the attitude. Is the attitude you kind of gotta get down in the. You can't skip over the. You can't. You have to be going through these things. You have to go through some of these crap projects, and Ken did, and that's where I picked up. It's like, okay, you guys gotta radically simplify this stuff. And the only way he knew that was he was in the pits. He was down there trying to actually make some of this stuff work. That higher level up managers somewhere in corporate back over here thought was a real great idea, and they signed off and they scheduled and ordered everything estimates, and it was when it came time to do it, stuck. So here it is. It's like, this is kind of the attitude.
I don't know about that. Have you been back to your old high school?
No, I'm far away.
Yeah, same with me. I don't go back. I don't think about it. And only people talk to me about it as negative people that had some. I had kinky hair. I cashed my check and I cut my hair to this length. I didn't like this Kinko. I didn't like all that.
This is a guy that started Kinko's.
I don't really care. And I know the problem with FedEx and these guys in New York. There's an arrogance of education.
So FedEx bought out Kinko's. FedEx bought Kinko's, and he was gone. He was done. He was like, I'm out of here. And he's kind of discussing the guys in corporate, and when they get involved, and how they see things.
I know the problem with FedEx and these guys in New York. There's an arrogance of education. These like you all in this room.
It cracks me up, the disdain you have for the very same university that you attended, the very same class you'd be sitting in.
No, I learned, and I'll tell you why. The kids here, all of you, were straight A types. You were separated from people like me because you had the Red Star reading group. And then you went to the extra special Kumon course, and you had all this extra bullshit, all this extra stuff. You went to your elitist junior high schools. Your elitist high schools got the GATE program. I'm here with the dumb shits. So I always looked at you guys as if the idiots, and these guys know what the hell they were doing. And I'm right. The workers know how to run the business. The people who know how to run the business best are in the lunchroom. They're not you executives. So there's an arrogance about education. You feel like all the people that aren't at your level are a bunch of idiots. They're smarter than you ever thought of being. Talk to the rank and file, talk to the workers, go to the lunchroom, make a sales call. But I'm sure you guys won't because, obviously I'm too important.
So that's the attitude. You gotta programming and doing the adventure-driven development. It's lots of dirty jobs, lots of dirty jobs, and they can't be delegated away. You gotta go figure them out and find them out how to do it. So here is the guys that made UNIX, which basically runs all of the current modern hardware and all the machines. And it didn't happen top down. It was definitely squirrely from the bottom up by these characters.
Back in 1969, a couple of computer scientists here at Bell Labs started to develop some programs they needed for their own use.
So Ken Thompson, he just wanted to write a game. He wanted to do a little game and give us a game simulator thing, and he didn't. He just wanted to write some games, and he wanted people to play his games as well. And that's where Unix came from, like, no joke.
What Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie started developing.
And Ken was just like, hey, can we make this stuff simpler? This stuff is way too complicated. Way too much other. And we have vendor lock-in? You mean I have to rewrite every single program in the assembly language that you're giving us, or some slow interpreted thing like BASIC, except something different? It was what he was using. He says, this is ridiculous. We should be doing the same thing that these basic programs are doing, is like basic interpreters. We should be able to compile that down to some universal assembly, some sort of that's where he came up with B and C, right? So this is the mind. It's like, okay, this has to be. We can't just be locked in. And if it wasn't for him, we would still be locked into these with the computer explosion of having like portable software. So we have a bunch of different CPUs running with one. It was the KMP of the time. It was the Kotlin multi-platform. Kotlin, like just today, Kotlin runs everywhere. You can put iOS, Android, web, desktop, the back end, anything that comes, watches, whatever comes up next. That's what C was at the time. So instead of being vendor locked into an Android or iOS, or you have to do the web, Chrome browser, you're not locked in anymore. You now have an out, and this is what his mind delivered, and he did it in a way that was simple and elegant and very just sweet. And then he had somebody help him explain it, right? Because these guys are not that great at communicating their ideas, even though their ideas are fantastic. They're not the best communicators, so they had to get Brian Kernighan, which is the third guy in the group, which is why any of us know about these characters is because of that guy's work with this manual on C, which is his language that he just refined and made it his idea. It was simple, portable, maintain. Like, how can we get this thing on a small machine so it runs way faster than the mainframes, because it's just way more efficient.
Developing then has evolved into the UNIX operating system, which by now is widely used not only in the Bell system, but in other places around the world.
Yeah.
In the next few minutes.
Yeah, so that's those guys, and this is where this is Ken Thompson here. His attitude, just think of his attitude. Like, he doesn't care. He's got the birth control glasses on. He's got a badass beard. but check it out.
We were trying to make computing as simple as possible. In the late 1960s, Dennis Ritchie and I realized that the then current operating systems were much too complex.
Yeah, because he had just worked on this project called Multics, and it failed. It was a fail. They're trying to do an operating system, and it failed badly. So he came in as like, okay, let's just bear down to the bones, bootstrap an operating system to get this patent thing working. And his deal was he was gonna do this patent system, which was dead in the water, failed project, super expensive. He says, I'm gonna solve you this thing, but it would just after that you kind of let me go, and that's how he kind of got permission. This guy is so crooky. Like, he sneaks in. He's the one that got the key to overnight to play with the computer when nobody else had access to it, behind closed door, behind lock and key. No wonder the computer revolution was not going to start. It was not going to start without this guy. With this guy sneaking in and going, okay, that we have this. I'm going to learn your thing, but then I'm going to just do this other thing. That's going to just no, wipe that all away. It's all, we're coming from the bottom up, not the top down. Let's how's it say here?
In the late 1960s, Dennis Ritchie and I realized that the then current operating systems were much too complex.
He's this very, very subtle here.
We attempted to reverse this trend by building a small, simple operating system on a mini computer.
Yeah, and he succeeded.
Well, what we wanted to preserve was not just a good programming environment in which to do programming, but a system around which a community could form.
Right. So the way it was happening before was it was this top-down thing, and it was all done by committee, and everything was done. So by the time you got the thing at the bottom, it was a confused mess. And these guys are going, no. We know how these systems work. We know how these things work. And they're on their own path. They're trudging their own. They've been down in this region right here. So they've been down in these and these. They've been around these things, and so they kind of know, what this like down here. And they're like, okay, we're bypassing. We'll do a couple years projects here, and then we're going for our prize, which is this. Let's just try something that's just radically simple and a different instead of this batch mode thing. We're like interactive. I'm right there in the machine. I'm not giving it off to some specialist somewhere else, and I go pick up the printer and lay it out later. No, I'm right there with it. I'm right there with the machine. I'm giving it instructions and giving it back. It was totally a brand new thing.
Fellowship. We knew from experience that the essence of communal computing, as supplied by remote access time-sharing systems, is not just to type programs into a terminal instead of a key punch, but to encourage close communication.
Right. So that was his vision. He was just like, how do we not do this key punch baloney and do this more interactive thing? Because we've already demonstrated that this is way, way faster. Instead of a day cycle, it's 2 minute, 5 minute, 7 minute cycles. So it was able. So that was their vision. That was their North Star, and that's where they were like, okay, we're just gonna try. We're gonna get our way through it one way or another. And here's this guy, Wisdom Warriors, and I was listening to him. He's pretty good. He's all right. He's good. But this point he made about courage to go these paths, because they just come up with a massive amount of resistance, and they're like, hey, I'm trying to make your problems go away. They're like, no, we don't want our problems to go away. We like our problems. It's just how it is. That is this mountain thing. That's just this dragon thing is just not going to let, even if you see the cave entrance to where the where the prize is. You're going to still have to fight all that stuff. And that, the dragon represents all the issues that people put in front of you. So here we go.
But what I want to bring your attention to is the structure of your values. You see, if you have the wrong value at the top of your hierarchy, if you venerate the wrong ideal, your life is going to lack the power and potency and potential it could have. For instance, I once put spirituality at the top of my value system. And as a result, my life kind of lacked potency. I got stuck in a lot of different ruts and it didn't feel quite true. But when I replaced spirituality with courage, and I put courage at the top of my value system and tried to lead my life with courage, whether that meant leaving relationships, overcoming addictions, going into the resistance of writing a book, like wherever I could practice courage, wherever there was fear and resistance, I did that. And in doing that, I shed my skin so many times. I overcame so many past versions of me and my life exploded with.
Yeah, that's just going up this mountain stuff. If you can keep it up, it's tough, man. This is not all there is. You get up in this region up here, oof, it's just one problem after another, isn't it? Then you have to be courageous, because if you think it's going to get easier, it's definitely not going to get easier. And by you thinking it should be getting easier is going to make you burn the hell out.
New power. And it just showed me that, wow, the ordering of my value system with courage in the lead, the courage to actually stand for what I believe, and the courage to speak what is true for me, the courage to make decisions that might be really hard to do right now, but very beneficial in the long run. This thing changed my life forever. And it created an unbound level of vitality that I'm still, exploring and expanding today. So
it definitely does that, for sure. So I'm going to leave some links to all this in the Diddly Do below, so you can go listen to the full thing if you want. And this is Ken Thompson. Now this is how this is what a few years ago. Like, I don't know. Sure. No, let's pass this year. So he's an older guy, and his T-shirt choices are choice. He has the best nerd T-shirts. Yes, I concur in his shirts. Here we go.
It was a monsterly over-engineered, over big project, and it's a typical second system syndrome.
So he's talking about Multics. He's talking about their AT&T, Bell Labs. They're trying to do their next generation of operating systems, and they called it Multics, and they had big plans for it. And we're going to do all the bells and whistles this time, and we're going to put them all in there so we can make sure this is the one last one and for all. And
they had a very nice system at MIT, and they decided they were going to do the next one better. That's kiss of death. And so
well, if they're going to do the next one better, right? If they're going to do that same thing, but somehow make it with all the bells and features and whistles, yeah, it's a bad idea. But if you do the next one better to refine it, to somehow make it faster, cheaper, smaller, more understandable, more modular, more extendable, that's different, right? If you're taking the exact system and you're not adding features, just refining it, that is actually not a bad idea.
Cooperated in a three-way thing with MIT, Bell Labs, and General Electric. General Electric provided the machine. It couldn't run on a normal machine. It had to have its own machine, monster. And then programming was done at Bell Labs, but it was mostly designed at MIT. And so we got these things, do this, and we did them. And mostly I was uninspired.
So he was doing one of these. Missions here. That makes it annoying. There, let me fix this window here. So he was doing a dungeon grind, burn down slog feature factory. So he was up in here, and it's just not that great. But when you're in there, you do learn a lot. To do adventure-driven development, you're going to have to do some slogging. There's going to be slogging on the path. As you go up the mountain, you're going to have to do some slogging, right? And it is good to know and have some discipline about it. But the goal is not to stay there, right? The goal is to get the experience like he had, which made his lights go off. Oh, we gotta radically simplify all this shit. We're doing way too much baloney here. There's got to be another way to do this. And that's the same thing now with KMP. Same kind of ideas. This stuff is way too complicated, guys. We got to radically simplify this stuff. We don't want to have teams of 15, 20 people all super confused with what we're doing. We want to hit teams of 3, 2, 1. Just way more radically simplify these things. And then we can add on other stuff as we need it. But core down.
I do it, and it was good work. I mean, I was a pretty good programmer. I just didn't know what I was. It was a notch in a big wheel, and it was producing something that I didn't know. I didn't want to use myself, At some point, management realized this, Bell Labs management, and they backed out of the project. So it now became just not General Electric. Who was the fellow on Honeywell, and MIT, and Bell Labs backed out. But they backed out with a nasty taste in their mouth. We don't do operating systems. No, and
Right. So they thought that experience with those people was how you do operating systems. Ken was like, "That's not how you do operating systems. What are you talking about?" Because he's like, he's been in the project. He's had to use all this crap. He's like, there's another way, right? But now he's got more resistance to this thing than even before. So here we go.
I wanted to do operating systems. So I actually found it was called a workstation. It's PDB-7. There was a remote job entry for electrical engineering circuits. You draw a circuit on a CRT tube.
So this is a computer laying around. Like again, by hook or by crook, he figured a way in.
And you push a button, the circuit goes into the main computer by way of data sets, kind of, telephone lines. And they do the crunching, and they come back, and then you can get the transfer functions of various sorts on the screen, all electrical engineering. I just took it over and made some games on it. It was
You're like, I just took that. Oh, you're not using it? Oh, I have some ideas.
There was one of the nice things about this is it had a monster. It had this horrible, kind of round scope like old TV, about this big around. But it had a hood that went like this and bifurcated your eyes. And that was great. So I built a little shoot 'em up space thing where you two guys out there in a very large space. And when you find each other, you start shooting at each other. And if you get on their tail, they can't get rid of you. So you're going to win if you can actually maneuver to get on their tail. But as you get on their tail, you see all their fire coming out around you. It was fun. And but you had.
So he's using this hardware. It should be doing operating system stuff, but he's writing these games. It's such classic stuff, man.
They had a partner, so that's what I used the telephone sets for. There were probably 10 of these remote job entry stations around, and I arranged to have them all loaded with my program, and somebody just wander over, look in, and choose, any one of the combinatorics to find out who you're going to fight. And so you're sitting there, and you don't know who you're fighting, and you're just. So I'm sorry, I'm wasting too much time.
Press on. No, I'd not even heard that story.
No, see, that is how this stuff. This is how you find the cave entrance. Is this kind of going off? Not technically, like it doesn't have to be technical.
The next thing was
going off in your own direction and asking for forgiveness and not permission. Was a big part of this. So that takes what? Courage. It takes courage.
I was interested in a disc. This PDB-7 had a disc. No other PDB-7 had one like this. It was 6 feet tall and a single platter, and the platter was on the vertical around. And there was kind of a folklore, you don't stand in front of it and you don't stand in the back of it, because if it lets go, it'll be like a propeller on an airplane going through. And it was fast. It was too fast for the machine, which was kind of a shame you couldn't make good use of it. But I wrote a disk scheduling algorithm to try to maximize throughput on.
So it's just where to put the head, and where to where to put the head, and where it's as is because it rotates. That's what he's talking about.
On potentially any disk, but in particular this disk. Got it going, but then I had to test it. I had to load it up with work. I mean, you don't say read, you get something back. That's any disk.
Remember, he's just kind of goofing off here.
To do that. So I had to, load it up, get it really, test its throughput under different algorithms and things.
He was seeing where he's going. He's in here messing with the dragon. He's dancing with the dragon. He's like, oh, what are you? Oh, hey, what are you? What are you all about? What's going on here? He has a goal in mind. This is just one of the things along the way. One of these little bugs in the cavern of the dragon.
And for that, I needed some programs on the side to do that, and so I started writing these programs on the.
Those programs on the side. He's creating an operating system, by the way. There's some programs on the side.
Side, and at some point, I realized, without knowing it up until that point, that I was 3 weeks from an operating system.
So this is that subconscious stuff that when you're engaged with the dragon, and you've gone and slogged and done your time down here and all this bullshit, you know some of its moves already, and you can make it hum along to your song while you're messing with it, while you're trying to find the chink in its armor, or is there several chinks that's going to take it down? Oh yeah. This is when the genius that everyone talks about. This is where it comes from this right at the edge of your skill level, and right, you're pushing the envelope. You're using your educated guesses and your knowledge of all the things you know they've gone along the way, going down the random tunnels that other people may have not gone because they want their safe, cushy thing. But this is the 2%, of the bell curve distribution. These are the people who are like, I don't care how long it takes, man. I'm just going to go in there and see how long it takes. I will whack the hell out of this dragon as long as possible because I am now in my space, in my zone. I'm in my little bubble of like my area, like right between like what's impossible and what's possible. In that gray zone, pushing through it, seeing what's going. He says it wasn't a straight line path. It was ding, 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 ding. And then all of a sudden, another cave opening opens up, right? So this first cave opening was when he was doing these junior roles when he was still at college, right? And he found the key to that room, and he's like, oh, I can go explore from midnight to 8 a.m.? Hey, I don't have anything else going on in my life. This is what I'm doing. So, yeah, the door opened up for him. The secret door opened up for him. And he was like, cave entrance. Oh, and he just dropped in. And I was like, what can we do with this? Where are we going? We're on the epic quest he's like, maybe operating systems. Because these are crap. This is bullshit. He was all using that stuff from midnight to 8 a.m. He's struggling, wrestling with it, looking at the manuals like, what the fuck? 28,000 different constructions. It's like, what the hell? And like, this is a mess. I learned it. I know it. I get it. It's a mess.
With 3 programs, 1 a week. An editor, I needed an editor to write code. I needed an assembler to turn the code into language I could run. And I needed a little kernel kind of overlay, call it an operating system. And luckily, right at that moment, my wife went on a 3-week vacation.
Luckily. Wow. So like our subconscious minds, when we're engaged in this level of like going up the mountain on the epic quest, this is the stuff that just happens. There's just the universe, if you're lucky and it's bestowed its blessings upon your quest, it will open up doors. Now you got to be knocking on lots of doors, right? But every once in a while, I want to open up. And there it is. And all you got to do is walk through and maybe poke and fuck a couple monsters.
To take my 1-year-old, roughly, to visit my in-laws who were in California. Disappeared all alone, and one week, and we had UNIX.
Yeah, I think programmers aren't quite as productive these days as they used to.
I'm getting some. What's going on here? My computer's choking up here.
So from that PDP-7, things went on. Somewhere you enlisted Dennis, or he enlisted you.
Pause that. Hold on.
When Unix was
okay, I have technical problems over. Okay, so this is another part of some more Ken Thompson talking about some things that just happen, how you get things done when you're dealing with the dragon, man. You can't play by by the rules. You got to take calculated risks. You may get caught. He took that chance. I'm sure he had other things he was doing because these are high IQ people who are systematizers who are in a system and they're trying to make it work for them. And that is the key thing. And just like in the mountain has a system, and you adhere to the system of the mountain, and it will, if you're lucky and your quest is worthy, it will open up for you. But not without the struggle.
You didn't turn it off in those days. There were these monster computers.
So he's talking about the computer that he got the special key, the secret key, to go from midnight to 8 a.m. So when the clock struck midnight, the door opened for him, right? The magic door that allowed him to take in information that was not accessible to his ilk and type normally, right? You don't let a slacker like Ken Thompson to use a computer unless he got the magical incantation to the supervisor somehow, some way.
Took multi-kilowatts of power in the heated rooms, and it was dangerous to turn them off because they would break when you turn them off. So they kept them on 24/7. And
that was one clue. Like, they keep them on 20. So somebody told him, "Oh yeah, they keep them on 24 hours." Really? You would think that all that power and all that stuff would wear out? No, we keep them on all the time. But nobody uses them. It's like, oh, really? From midnight to 8 a.m.? You're only doing 2 shifts? Oh, really? He's like, cave opening, He's got what his little thing was like. I would love to work on these machines, man. I was like, how do we make that happen? His little reticular activation system opens up, and it just their subconscious takes over and goes, just waiting around, looking around, just looking for that opening, and all of a sudden, the spell of secret door detection, which he cast weeks before, activates.
But they only had 3 shifts of work to do, 2 shifts of work. So they ran the computers from 8 a.m. to midnight, and then they were available from midnight to 8. Normally they just sat in a dark room, but eventually, through perseverance and just being around, I got a key.
Through perseverance and just being around. Clues. Just being around. Constantly.
And I could go in anytime after midnight and
boom!
And
he got a key, the secret key to the hidden room, which normally people of his hippies are not allowed in. Okay, guys that look like you should really go to the organization and go up to the hierarchy. No, he got in through the back door.
use it like a personal computer. It was, the size of a large house.
$10,000 an hour or $5,000, whatever the fee is, the normal adjusted for inflation rate, and he gets to use it for free because he just hung around and sweet talked and was a hippie, didn't have a day job, so he could go in there from midnight to 8 a.m. and filled his minds with literally billions of dollars worth of information about all the things he was about to set on the next part of his journey after he found that secret key.
Yes, I did. A teacher who became a very good friend of mine left Bell Labs to teach for 2 years maybe at Berkeley, and those were my years of graduating. And he actually enrolled me in graduate school. I didn't apply for graduate school at all.
He was such a slacker.
And he enrolled me, and so I had 1 year of graduate school, got a master's degree in it, and then he went back to Bell Labs at the same time that I was recruited by Bell Labs and went back to Bell Labs.
This guy's like, you have to get this guy, but you can't tell him you can't make it look like you're trying to get him because he's not into it, man. He just wants to do the computer stuff. He doesn't really care about all this academia, blah, 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 blah. He just wants to write games and run them on the computers and then have people play his games. Oh my gosh. This is kind of the quality. Here, let me make sure I got the right. Okay, this is a little sort of tangential, but it's the vibe. It's kind of like thinking about things, where things come from, how people generate their ideas and their concepts. And I'll make some comments on this as it goes along.
Or non-existent. And so you can have incredible artistic flourishing with no or little or no functioning university, because we know that because for the first couple of millennia there was no such thing, and all the great riches of human history is sitting there for us to peruse and experience and expand our lives with and improve our lives with. They didn't have a university, and so it's not an opposed university. I think university should go away. I'm not anti-university, but those things are not tightly correlated. And this is so poisonous, by the way, this thought. When people, if you've run into this notion, Shakespeare didn't write Shakespeare's plays. Okay, so going too far afield into that, when people try to spring this on me, which has happened occasionally, one of the things they almost invariably say is, well, Shakespeare was not an educated man. He didn't go to Oxford, he didn't go to Cambridge, he didn't do any of these things that we associate now with necessary for intellectual, artistic, philosophical excellence. So,
right. So like Ken Thompson, he did like enough school to do the computer stuff, because that's really what he was like. This is where the computers are. This is where I wanted to do the computer thing, and that was his thing. He didn't really care about any other stuff. I think he absorbed it kind of side tangentially, but he was really not really interested in that stuff. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. It's like, it's really not the institution that he was going to. It was at Bell Labs. It was like Bell Labs had him. Isn't that he went to Bell Labs? Bell Labs got him, right? Even though they don't see it that way, they don't want to admit it that way. That's like, we are Bell Labs. You should be glad to be here. It's like, no, Bell Labs, you should feel lucky you got a Ken Thompson and a Dennis Ritchie. Is really, and the fact that someone at Bell Labs somewhere was like, we have to keep this place for these kinds of guys, because this is where it comes from. And maybe they won't admit it. They want to admit it. They still, there's a confliction there. But someone had the smarts to put that thing together for a time period, right? That we got UNIX and all this other stuff out at sea and all this stuff that was not going to happen top down.
he must have not done it because he didn't have access to the kind of education you would need to produce perhaps the greatest treasure trove in English literature, the plays of Shakespeare and poems of Shakespeare. What the mistake there is not that.
That's like the UNIX, right? That's treasure trove that we got from Ken being Ken and not being punished for being a little cheeky.
Shakespeare didn't go to college because he certainly didn't. That's not a mistake. The mistake is to assume that anybody did. And in fact, pretty much nobody did. There was even the people who were going to Oxford and Cambridge were not going to anything even remotely resembling what we think of as an educational institution today. The emphasis, of course, was hugely on 3 subjects. Greek, a little bit. Greek was sort of, if you had Greek, that really put you in rarefied air. Latin, okay, Latin, that's what you're going to learn. And religion. These were religious institutions in theory. In practice, not so much, right? But in theory, these were hugely dedicated religious institutions. So if you're going to be there, you had to spend a lot of time on theology. So, and the people who tended to attend were people who were serious about theology, so there was something there for them.
So back then, it was the theology thing, and in the current times, there was some other thing that was focused that maybe Mozart and these musician guys were not interested in, but they had to go through it, and so they dealt with it.
Who were interested in languages, so this is sort of linguistics and philology, as it would be more rightly called for the time, and other thinkers in general, but also lots and lots of wealthy sons who were just sort of killing time. And often many of these degrees were conferred for little or nothing, so basically in hopes that you would endow the school. And so what it meant to be educated at the time generally would say, if you were wealthy, you would have a private tutor at home, and you might attend a year or not at one of the colleges, maybe, if you were sort of into that kind of thing. But it was almost entirely private, and the literature would be privately distributed because all of the authority, if you were a nobleman, came from being recognized at court. So your letter writing and your private poems, these sorts of things were hugely important because that was your world, that was the audience you were seeking.
It's like the corporate environment.
Someone like Shakespeare was not writing primarily for that audience, although of course he did court performances, etc. But his world was not the court. It was much more greater emphasis on the public. Of course, that balance shifts during his lifetime. But the public becomes increasingly important because of the social trends and the growing wealth of England and all the sort of socioeconomic dynamics of history. But his education, for his time, he was immensely educated. He went to one of the first, apparently, grammar schools where he would learn the rudiments of Latin. He would be introduced to some of the classics, and you see all of these elements in his work. But we think, oh, that can't have been enough. He must have had more teaching than that. But it turns out that no, you hadn't. And if you look away from Shakespeare and look at so many other great figures in history, and you realize all of a sudden, oh my gosh, what they had access to compared to the modern world was so narrow. Look at someone like Mozart, who traveled all over the world, all over his world, all over, performing and meeting. And so he was able to hear a huge variety of music relative to his time. But when he apparently later in life first heard Bach, he was amazed. He did not have access to Bach, who was just, not that much earlier than him, but Bach's music had not really traveled outside of the German world. And so, So
that's the same thing as Ken going to these computers and trying to figure them out. Like, and he's listening to all these, he's tasting what these systems, how these things are put together, right? And he's coming up with his own stuff. And it's through his own epic quest. That's how it came through. For whatever reason, somebody gets jazzed up about something. What he went off and did afterwards, he did like music compression and like rebuilding piano players as an output device. Okay.
He didn't hear it until his musical ideas were pretty well established, and so he was amazed and thought it was wonderful to hear this. But he didn't have access to that for his education. What he actually had access to was incredibly narrow. And so he developed through practice, through rehearsal, through self-cultivation.
Right. Through practice, through rehearse, doing his own thing. Ken Thompson in that building from midnight to 8 a.m. just by himself, just trying to make this thing work. That's where this stuff comes out of. Like just exploring areas and regions that people don't get access to or don't have, and just being somewhat fascinated about that whole thing. That's where this stuff comes through, right? What can we go with it? It can be channeled in different ways. Now for Ken, it was doing OSs, but there's other ways to channel this to doing something else.
Not through a systematic education brought on by access to these great texts and all these great masters like Bach, and he just didn't have access to it, or a lot of it. He had access to some, and relative to his time, he had access to a lot more than most people. But compared to any first-year student going into a music college today and starting, where you have access to all the music in the world throughout all of history, and you have all kinds of theory, and you just have these unbelievable and unimaginable riches that you can listen to, and you can see the sheet music, and you can hear it, and you can understand it. But that doesn't create a Mozart.
Right. So just by blasting all the content at people doesn't show the path it takes to get up the content. You can show all the results of all the battles up here, but it's going to be very difficult to communicate what's involved with climbing the mountain, right? You can have the shot, the photograph from the top of the mountain, right? It's like, oh, wow, it's amazing. But is it really? But to that person taking the photo, yeah, it's amazing. But what's the photo? It's just another photo, right? But going up here to get the photo on the top of the mountain, that's the whole thing. And not everybody wants to do that. It's a pain in the dick, and you may not get there. There's lots of crags and ways to fall over, and it's boring. A lot of it's boring, and it's frustrating, and you're wrong most of the time, and your music sounds like crap. So how do you keep going? What's that thing inside that makes you want to keep going? It's The imagination of the epic quest. That's what it takes. That's where that inspiration has to come from somewhere. And it's a choice, really. It's like, okay, I'm gonna make this the epic quest. I'm gonna see where I go with this, and it's really that simple, really. And you just keep going with it. You just keep going with it. It's like that stick-to-itiveness. Some people got it, some people don't. I don't know where it comes from. It's gotta have like a fascination about it.
Right? That's not where Mozart comes from. And so we tend to look at these large institutions and go, oh, this is where greatness is going to come from. Success in an institution is the sort of grounds for going elsewhere. But
they like to take credit for it. You better believe it, but that's not where. It would be nice if we could put it, like, have a institution that we just plug people into and pop out a Mozart. Wouldn't that be nice?
Again, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, often institutions will destroy the opportunities because, the institutional dynamics. Another classic example from the modern era is, Einstein is working away as a patent clerk, and everybody, says, oh, we shouldn't have been at a university, and what a waste of a genius, and so on. But imagine if he's at a university and he has a teaching load, and he's got graduate students, and he has to publish or perish, and, he can't find parking, and, all these things. Is this going to help his research, or is this going to hinder his research? Is this going to help make Einstein more like Einstein and further his genius, or?
Ken kind of did the Einstein run. He went and looked at the patents. He says, Ken was in there, doing the code, just finding out how this stuff works, trying things. And that's what Einstein was doing. He's going through all these patents and looking at, that's interesting. Oh, that's curious. That's an interesting use of it. I was like, how would that work? I'm not sure.
Or is this going to inhibit his work? Is this going to damage his productivity? It's an open question. Some people thrive in this environment, produce brilliant work. Lots of people don't. But the history is clear. It's not necessary. Potentially helpful for some people in some instances, but it's just not necessary.
Yeah, it's just another crag on the mountaintop. Another thing on the top for people that see and want to go. They see the cave opening. And they even looking for the dragon at all? They just want to coast down here in a dungeon grind, or down here in a tar pit of seemingly good ideas, or just do a tunnel of fake agile down. They just want to collect the paycheck. Hey man, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Families got to be raised. People braces have to be put on. I get it, but there's some people, that 2%, right, that want to see the epic quest. And they want to run on it. They want to go. So let's see. Let's play this a little bit longer.
And it's only helpful when it is associated with these other kinds of environments that I talk about, like letter writing and conversations and coffee houses and leisure, and all of these sorts of things are much, much, much more important than any sort of academic institution.
Right, his buddies. So what happened? The reason why Ken actually went to you can listen to some of the interviews I'll leave in the doobly-doo. The reason why he went to Bell Labs is because he saw a bunch of people there was on the same wavelength as him. So somebody was picking the right people. So the recruiters were picking the right people, right? It wasn't Bell Labs. Oh, Bell Labs. It was like all these people who were doing this work that he was super into. The coffee houses, the art cafes, and all that stuff that these guys were going into, playing and doing their art, talking, getting together, and they're jazzed up about it, whatever it is.
Of course, that artists and writers and thinkers haven't needed some sort of support, right? This is, back to the notion of some material wealth is necessary. But what that's meant has varied, greatly throughout history. So in ancient China, again, many of the writers and poets either studied for and passed the Confucianist exams, or studied for them and did not pass, and then sort of operated as quasi-official secretaries. But this gave them some free money and a certain kind of education that allowed them to sort of flourish in the arts. And they had an audience because you had all the other people who had been studying for the Confucius exams who sort of were educated to be an audience for the kind of work that they produce. So that dynamic was there, and they're making a sort of marginal existence as sort of secretaries, and they could get further recognition if they produced some poetry or calligraphy of merit.
And that's kind of, that's kind of how it is today. But I'm not going to go further on that. I think you get the idea, and if you don't, I hope you do. And I'm Chris Athanas. You can give me a like and subscribe, and we'll continue on the adventure-driven development tip.